Recently, I have encountered more and more people using Kratom. Kratom is a tree in Southeast Asia growing mainly in Malay Peninsula. Locals either chew the fresh leaves of the Kratom or dry them up, grind them and make a tea. We don't know much about the remote Kratom use. Some sources say the Kratom has been used since the time immemorial, but actually there are no sources that can confirm this information. For example, ancient Egyptian papyri and cuneiform tablets contain a lot of reference to the use of cannabis several thousand years ago. I have a video about that, you guys can check it out. This is not the case about Kratom. In fact, the history of its use in ancient times is not well known, at least in the Western scientific literature. As far as we know, the first time Kratom was mentioned in the Western scientific literature was in 1836. Someone by the name Law, while out there in the Malay Peninsula, wrote a dissertation. There he mentions that local opium smokers, whenever they cannot get opium, use Kratom instead. What else do we know from those times? First, Kratom was a part of local culture, most notably rural culture. Its use was not considered a problem, much less a medical one. And it was not a subject of social scrutiny. Moreover, the locals knew that a person can develop a habit toward Kratom, can get used to it, and yet that was not considered to be an issue. At least for men. Among women, it probably was less acceptable. Secondly, Kratom was used for a variety of purposes. In rural areas, men used to chew on leaves. That would give them strength, boosted their mood, and reduced fatigue. They could do hard physical labor for longer periods of time. Kratom was also used, as I've just mentioned, as a substitute for opium, or for opiate withdrawal syndrome, to use the modern terminology. That's where it becomes interesting. On the one hand, Kratom acts as a psychostimulant, it increases our energy, it elevates our mood, it reduces the fatigue. On the other hand, it has sedative properties and a calming effect. In a way, it resembles substances like cocaine and amphetamines, and on the other hand, it resembles the action of opioids, things like morphine, for instance. Throughout the 20th century, you can find a scattering of articles that confirm that observation. In small doses, the inhabitants of Malay hinterland used Kratom to boost their energy, and in larger doses and in the form of a tea, they used it as a substitute for opium. In 1921, mitragynine was isolated. That's the main compound in the Kratom leaves. In fact, there are several other important substances like 7-hydroxymitragynine, but mitragynine appears to be the main one. By the way, the first case of Kratom addiction was described in 1957. For the next several decades, there was not much information about Kratom. Here and there you can find several articles describing its use, but generally speaking, it was not a part of the scientific or medical mainstream. Sometime in the early 2000s, Kratom started to spread within the United States. Most likely it first appeared in the US right after the Vietnam War, but in small quantities. In the mid-1990s, a number of head shops and smoke shops learned about Kratom, and after that, Kratom started to spread. Kratom is increasingly used as a substitute for opioid drugs or even as a treatment for opioid addiction. Research has recently picked up, and since about 2017, there has been a huge increase in number of articles dedicated to Kratom. Most of them repeat each other, but at this current time, Kratom is being heavily researched. It is important to realize that neither mitragynine nor other constituents of the Kratom leaf are classical opioids or amphetamines. Therefore, it is necessary to study how exactly it affects us and whether something useful can come out of it. FDA was considering to put Kratom on Schedule 1, which would render its recreational use illegal. But eventually it did not happen. It is relatively easy to ban something. But first, it generally doesn't solve the issue of using a substance. Secondly, it is much harder to study something scientifically if it is a Schedule 1 drug. Just think about psilocybin and LSD, which we actually could not study up until recently because of the governmental ban on these substances. The thing is, Kratom might have some therapeutic potential, and we just don't know yet. As you might know, one of the main differences between the poison and the medicine is in dosing. There is even such a thing as an American Kratom Association that supports its users, educates them, and promotes legalization of Kratom. With high doses and frequent use, Kratom might cause problems that are very similar in clinical presentation to opioid addiction, and I did encounter such cases. In the US, The product is legal in most of these states. Anyone can purchase it and try it out, so just be careful. Okay, so what's the bottom line? First, Kratom is still poorly studied. What is it? A psychostimulant, a sedative, both? What receptors it affects in our brain? What are the potential risks of its use and what are potential long-term benefits? These are all important current scientific questions. The fact that it was used by the local community for centuries is actually encouraging. It might be that we will have to learn how to use it properly, just like we learned to use properly other psychoactive substances: coffee, alcohol, tobacco, cannabis. In fact, I'm glad that it has not been banned yet, simply because this way we can study it, and that's important. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know in the comment section what do you guys think about the Kratom. Subscribe to my channel and have a good day.